I will always see the guy's eyes that came in my house. And he said, "Are you Daniel Price's father?" You know, and you're like, "Yes, I am." He says, "Sit down." So we sat down, and he says, "I just have to tell you that your son was killed."
In the end, it's really about Daniel in this case. You know, it's about his accomplishments, it's about his family, and it's about their crushing loss. And that art can, in this case, come along in a ministerial way with the capacity to truly heal a broken heart.
Phil he's an artist, so he has, you know, the artist kind of mindset. He sees things differently. His heart works differently. He's a very passionate and compassionate person. He cares deeply for people. He just wants to help people, help them in their pain, and he wants to help these families.
By taking up what he does, the Fallen Soldier Project, he's got a love to do it because it's a labor of love. I can just see that. Going around and bringing those and having presentations to the families.
Yeah, and our first view of it will be at the unveiling. So I expect it will be a bit of an emotional experience. Just, you know, the pictures, the portraits are huge. They're like 24 by 30, I think they are. So it's, you know, going to be, whoa, there's Dan.
I have 3 working studios, and this place that we're in right now is my main studio. It's our home offices. It's the National Gallery for the American Fallen Soldiers Project, but it's a place of solitude, of refuge, where I go to connect with the guys, in this case Daniel. Of course, Dan needs to be represented with respect and honor and dignity and all these things, and that I do. But the family has to feel like, in a very warm and present way, that they see their son, their brother. That with no question in their mind, it's not some rendition, it's not some, you know, kind of good portrait. It's actually not only a likeness of Daniel, but it's an exact likeness. It's him, you know, as if he's staring back at them for the first time since he was killed in 2012.
It was a day a lot like today.
It was.
It was a Sunday.
A warm, sunny, you know, bright, clear day.
2:30 in the afternoon. The doorbell rang, but the wrong doorbell. Usually people come to the back door and ring, but this was the front door. And so I went out to see who was there, and there was 3 Marines standing on the doorstep. And I knew what happened. They don't send them to tell you that your son was wounded. And I just said, "Ruth, you better come here." And so she came around the corner, and I can remember her face, seeing her face, and she just kind of put her hand up on her face.
You just know immediately. And as far as reaction, I think you're numb.
There's some 9/11 coins, and there's the buildings behind me there of the Twin Towers, and of course I've been there so many times. I've been to Ground Zero so many times. Actually have delivered a portrait there right after grand opening at the museum at Ground Zero.
When 9/11 happened, in 2001, he was a junior in high school. So he was trying to decide what direction to go in, where to go, what to do. And I think that the military was a strong possibility, but he wasn't really headed in any direction. When the Twin Towers were struck, he said, "That's just not right. That's just, you know, what a cowardly way to do battle is to come and hit civilians." And it made him very angry, and I think that was a tipping point.
I think everyone was affected by 9/11. I know that affected Brandon, it affected us. I think even if you didn't have, you know, connections or people that you knew in New York, it just affected our whole nation. I think it moved people very deeply. It brought our country closer. And I know for Brandon, he felt like that was a calling for him to do something different.
He went out with the guys, and they were with commandos. And the commandos were going to take this village. It was a village that they wanted. It was up on a mountain type thing, and the commandos were getting really chewed up, and there was a lot more there than what they thought there was. So Dan and the guy with him volunteered to go out to help the guys. So they went across 800 meters of open ground. They took the dead off the field, and then they went back and they took the injured off, took the injured off the field and took the dead off the field, and then they assaulted it with the two of them and went up scaled the walls of this building and got up on top like you see in the movies and dropped their hand grenades down the smokestacks or whatever on there, and thought that all the guys were gone, but they got off and were going through, and somebody snuck up behind them and killed
machine
both of
gun.
them with a
Machine
a heavy machine gun, and they were both killed.
Yeah, Daniel Price does stand alone in the four of the Michigan guys that I've painted, but and it is this status. He is so highly decorated. Bronze Star Valor, Silver Star, 6 particular specific tours. Some operating missions we'll never know of. They're so highly classified. But it wasn't just that, but his faith. He had an enduring faith that was attractive towards his men. He didn't impose it by will, but by behavior and by the way he handled himself. Yeah, I think during the painting process for Daniel, it was the one thing, the tempo, let's call it that for the pace of his portrait, was a spirit of excellence. The standard in which I set for myself in painting him was extremely high. So I knew that every tooth had to be placed perfectly, and those beautiful crystal blue eyes had to be, painted electrically. And that likeness had to be, not just in form, but it had to be an absolute. The process for me to paint, in this case, he's somewhere around 230 portraits around that I produced over the last decade. 10 years ago, it was really different. It was quite different for me in the manner and style in which I approached painting that soldier, sailor, airman, Marine. In this case, for Daniel, I have to, for purposes of my own capacity, emotionally and physically, chronologically as well, in the time that needs to be spent to make him just right, take in a certain amount of information, but not everything. It's kind of incomprehensible, and it's not really palatable as the artist, to just absorb every detail about Dan. It's just not the right way to go at it, because you get bogged down in this emotional connection that occurs during the painting process. In this case, my hope is that he'll take around 60 hours. So preparation was, about half a day. I read over and, know his age and where he's from and how he died, unfortunately, small arms and 27 years old and so forth. And I get enough to be able to step up on his behalf, in his stead, and work on him. And if I need to, I can talk to him. I can communicate as if and in belief that he's there with me through that boat ride, through that journey. And that way, when I go to Michigan in this situation and pull him from the box and say, here's your son, our American hero, he's there. And he's in full capacity, represented well with the highest level of dignity and respect.
We have our faith, and we knew that he was in God's hands, and we trusted in that. No matter what happened, we knew that if something happened to him, he was going to be with the Lord. And that gave us a lot of comfort.
Yeah, well, Daniel's going to be my fourth fallen hero from Michigan, but I'll never forget the start, and that was Specialist Brandon Stout.
I know 10 years, it's still really hard, especially that day, because that was the worst day of my life. And you don't really get over it, and you don't want to go back there.
Brandon was stationed at Camp Rush Maya. They were deployed to take some equipment to the Iraqi airport where they were going to retrofit some of the Humvees. The glass in the Humvees was becoming shrapnel in an attack, so they were going to upgrade them so that they could take a blast better, and we would maybe not have as many casualties. And there was discussion on whether they were going to stay at the airport that night or go back to their camp, and the decision was made to go back to the camp, and so the caravan was headed back, and they were attacked by a roadside bomb, an IED, a very large one, and he was killed instantly.
The American Fallen Soldiers is a nonprofit organization, and we serve the families of fallen military. So our mission is to serve the families, honor the guys who've died, and not only guys, but women. We serve all branches, and to remind Americans of the sacrifice that's been paid for their freedom. So that's why we do the public presentations. When we started the project, it actually was we were never going to do a project. It started with the loss of a friend. He lost a friend in Iraq in 2006. It was a childhood friend that the two families had grown up together, and when he went to the funeral, he was very affected by just what he saw and the military, the reaction of the family, and just hearing about Blake's service and all the things that he had done. And he came home from the funeral and wanted to do something for the family. So it took him a while to figure out what he wanted to do, but eventually he decided he wanted to do a painting of Blake. So he did a painting. It took him several months, and we actually gave the painting to his dad in 2007. And when his dad got the portrait, he called Phil that night, and the reaction was, "You've brought my son home." And as an artist, that was something Phil had never heard before. So it affected him very strongly, and then he decided after a few days that he wanted to do another portrait for another family. Then he did another one, and he had the same reaction, and then we did another one. So the first 6 paintings we did in 2007, that's what started it all.
I paint in acrylic, so that's a water-based paint. Yeah, my mom recognized when I was a little boy that I could draw. I went to some art classes, but it wasn't for me. So I'm self-taught. If you can think of a subject matter and a time and place, I've either painted it or drawn it, and that now holds true for delivering portraits. I've delivered one pretty much in every location you can imagine across America.
We are sitting in the American Fallen Soldiers National Gallery. We opened in June of 2016, so we've been open right at a year. We're open to the public. We're open 5 days a week. We open on Saturdays or Sundays if somebody wants to come do a tour. So we're always available.
So the style is black and white, right? So they're painted in black and white in order and in reference to they're no longer flesh. And the black and white is a spiritual way that I came up with. It's a style that I never painted in before. I paint in black and white and leave the color solely for their eyes, because that is where life is ultimately found, and unfortunately that's also where it dissipates from in the human journey and existence. And so therefore I think that brings them to a place of impact. In this case, he had blue eyes, and when I get done, and usually the blue eyes are the last thing, that it brings a magnitude and a scale and a scope where you can really feel him there, looking back, that window of the soul is staring back at Mom and Dad in a way as if he was right there in front of them.
And it's amazing having that portrait in our room. It's like puts him here, and we love it. Even our grandson, who never met Brandon, now is attached to Brandon just because I think of the portrait. He sits there and looks at him, and he'll tell me that he misses Brandon, and he never met him, but he misses him. And he talks like they're best friends or old pals, and yeah, we love having it.
If there's nothing in those eyes, if there's no soul in those eyes, then the portrait just doesn't work. So many of the portraits he's done, he's started them and, you know, had to scrap it and then start again and then start again. So the most times that he's done one painting was 7 times before it's got the life in it.
We were called by,
Andersons.
yeah, by the Andersons.
I remember when David Warson and Daniel Price were killed in action, and I went to the airport and honored them as they were taken to the funeral home, which is a big day, one you don't ever forget. I was in that crowd as just one person in thousands, and I did some snooping around and checking, and I read the story of Dan Price, and he's an amazing guy. Comes from an amazing family, and so I recommended Dan Price. It's an amazing story. Everyone should hear that story. He is what makes America great.
And they asked if we would be willing to receive one of those portraits. They thought of us. They had received a portrait.
Yeah,
Um,
Brandon Stout, what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
2 or 3 years ago. We're willing.
I get all the pictures, so I'm that gatherer of information and trying to get them to send us the photographs, the type of photographs that we're looking for, which are family photographs, military photographs. Instead of the families choosing the pictures for us, you know, I'm trying to get all that I can, and then we choose the picture that we're painting. The family doesn't really actually know which photograph that's being painted. So he doesn't paint from a conglomeration of all the photographs together and then, you know, paints this person out of that. He paints from a specific photograph that we see that is the one.
I consider it a blessing or an honor. It's kind of ironic to say it that way, talking about the pain that you carry or the struggles emotionally that you might go through. I can't count them how many times I've cried, because I literally from week to week, if you think of it, in the process of getting a request, and, you know, I've got 500 plus and pending that are coming in more every week, taking on a new story of a guy who died in battle, you know, embracing that story, learning about it, meeting his family. Many times, some of them are on the verge of, and some unfortunately have, that I've actually met, you know, took their life early, and they're overwhelmed with grief.
I don't know why, but we've always felt very close to people who have had loss. We've been able to deal with that loss and not take it on for ourselves, but want to help them or just love on them. I mean, really, that's all we do, is just love on the families, and we're not afraid of their pain, which most people are uncomfortable around death and dealing with those emotions. But Phil and I are, it's not that we like it, but we're okay with it.
So when I find myself low or I find myself challenged, I just look upon them and I consider the pain that they carry and the situations they've gone through, and it uplifts me. and it carries me through. So it's really them that push me forward.
The portraits are amazing,
Yeah,
and
please.
you know, it's just, when I look at them, and I haven't actually seen any of them in person, I've just seen them online, but it's like the eyes are so real, just so, you know, it's almost like you can see this person looking out at you, and it's, we don't have a lot of good portraits of Dan, so we're just really looking forward to having something that we can embrace and,
You know, the whole special
put him back in our home
operations-
again.
The whole special operations thing, Dan didn't want his face out on anywhere, you know, and so
Yeah.
he always wanted to have it kept offline, and if he could see it now with what's going on, he would just shake his head.
Please rise for the entrance of the portrait of Gunnery Sergeant Daniel Price.
Originally, we were never going to meet the family. I was never going to present each portrait in person. They weren't going to have a box. They weren't going to be flown on an airplane. You know, these ceremonies were never going to be conducted in front of the public. And frankly, initially, people were asking me, why are you doing this? You're exposing these grieving families to people. And I didn't have all the answers back then, and I still don't have all the answers, but I've gained some knowledge, and it's really not about that. It's not about exposure of the pain that they're going through. It's about reminding us all of the sacrifice that's occurred and the fact that we should never forget. And sometimes that takes putting your pain out in front of the public.
So on behalf of us and a grateful nation, here is your son and our hero, Gunnery Sergeant Marine Daniel Price. Thank you. Slide it, Reggie. Okay, come on over, Mom. Okay, take a look.
There was a moment where it's like I'm stating, here he is, and I remember uttering the words in fullness. He's there in whole, you know, and speaking in terms as if he's there back home.
But the other smile I referred to and those beautiful blue eyes are all there. So I think being in a ballpark, I'd say we hit a home run. Yeah. Okay. It was my honor. Thank you for allowing me to rip.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Whenever you want to, you can go down and go to your chairs. Okay.
We're involved in Art Prize for the first time this year. We're really excited. We're going to be displaying at the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Museum and displaying all the other portraits that we've presented up in the Grand Rapids area.
That was very hard for me. When Jeff told me that they wanted it to go to the Ford Museum, I was like, what? Not the original, not that we have on the wall. And he's like, yeah, you know, we'll get it back. And I'm just like, it was very hard for me to let go.
You look from left to right, and you have Navy SEAL David Warson, then Specialist Brandon Stout, and of course then it comes over to Gunny Marine Daniel Price, and ends up with Ross Smith.
One of the Gold Star dads told me, he said, we are our dead sons' voices. Let's keep talking about our sons and about their service.
We thank you for housing us and having us at this little corner of the Gerald R. Ford Museum. Will at least shed some light on the fact that they're still over there. They're in dark places, still taking on the bad guys. So as long as they're there and they're on that wall for us, I'll do my best here with the brushes God gives me to try to restore them back to life. So thank you. God bless each one of you and your families.
And the more I look at the portrait, the longer I look at it, and the more I just see it, I almost am waiting to hear him laugh.
Yeah, when I saw it, I was like, oh wow. It's got those blue eyes and that big smile.
I think it's amazing. I'm really happy with it. I can't wait to get it home and just kind of sit sit with it in the house and look at it and just see where it fits.
Yeah, I think that picture was of my daughter standing next to him. Yeah, at her wedding, and he had that big smile. So I'll probably be sitting there looking at it and expect him to talk at some point. It just makes you, I don't know, it just makes you happy. It makes you so proud and so happy, and it's like, it brings you back to before he got killed. To me it does. It brings me back to those good times that you could sit with him around the table and listen to him. It really brings you back before he got killed. I'm very proud of him for his service, what he did, what he stood for, what he ultimately gave. You know, he was really, he was a great Marine. He was a great son.